Hello and welcome to the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your Pitt beat writers, Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson here, as always, taking your questions on the show about Pitt football and Pitt basketball and all things University of Pittsburgh athletics. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get those Tuesday episodes, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Stephen, the Pitt Panthers did stop their bleeding and did get a win on a Saturday against Miami, the worst team in the ACC. No one's impressed by that, but they're at least out of the loss column. And now, if they're going to make a climb back, you suppose it starts now.
Yeah, not much of a runway left to the end of the season, but there's a real big opportunity for the Panthers to finish strong. They got pretty lucky. I mean, they faced, you can call it lucky, but they faced the worst of their ACC schedule at the beginning of the year. So there's an opportunity here against some of the ACC's worst teams to kind of finish strong and give themselves a good runway into the ACC tournament. But, they lost to Virginia. They lost to Florida State. Sometimes the level of competition doesn't matter. It really matters how Pitt plays.
Absolutely. Let's get to some questions here. This one comes from Christian. Christian asks, Pitt's offense moved better Saturday against Miami. Is Jaland Lowe part of the problem, and should Jeff Capel not play him as much when Ishmael Leggett is on the floor? Of course, Stephen, Jaland Lowe missed the game with a concussion as he was in concussion protocol, and Jeff Capel said he would be back. But considering how bad Pitt's offense has kind of fallen a little bit here, is there a thought there to maybe splitting time between him and Ish, or should they get back to just those two playing and they just need to play better together, and that's the bottom line?
Yeah, I fall more on the side of these two guys need to play better together. And I think Leggett has really taken a step forward in terms of the way that he has moved the ball personally. He think towards the beginning of the year, and especially the beginning of ACC play, he had a tendency to let the ball stick and play a little bit more isolation ball instead of looking to create when, teams sent extra help towards him or had more guys paying attention to him because he is such a great scorer. Lowe is their leading assist guy. He's their best passer. So I don't think you get much out of not putting him on the floor for longer stretches of time. I don't think that's necessarily the wisest thing to do. I think, it is also notable that, Pitt did look really disorganized early in that Miami game. They had a bunch of turnovers. They overpassed a little bit. They, did not look as smooth without Jaland Lowe on the floor. So, you can say that they looked better moving the ball on Saturday against Miami. I think it's also notable that Miami, not only are they the worst team in the ACC, just record-wise, but they are the worst offensive team or worst defensive team, in the ACC as well. There wasn't a ton of pressure on the guards. There wasn't, great interior defense as well. So I think you got to factor that into it as well when you think about, Pitt looked better against Miami. I think the level of competition does matter there. We've seen Jaland Lowe be a great facilitator plenty of times against better competition. So I don't think this necessarily – I don't think you need to take much more away from, one game against a bad team and a bad defense in particular to say, the offense moves better without Jaland Lowe. Because at the end of the day, we've talked about this before, their numbers have dipped recently. But for most of the season, Pitt has been among the top 30 teams in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency. I think right now they're down to, I believe it's 35. If I can check
35.
Yeah, they're 35th in KenPom. But that's still in the top 10% of teams in Division I. So to my mind, the offense really hasn't been as big of a problem, I think, as other people might. The defense has really been the bigger issue from my view. So I wouldn't overreact to any one single game sample size about the state of Pitt's offense, and especially how it looks without Jaland Lowe in the mix.
No, I feel you on that. And one thing I thought Jeff said on the ACC coaches Zoom on Monday, he talked about Ish, and he said that teams are looking for him to not pass. They think he won't. And I think there might be a little bit of opposite of that too. They're looking for Jaland Lowe to make the extra pass. And so sometimes I think it's just those guys adjusting in the moment and understanding what teams are trying to take away from them and taking what they're not taking away from them. So I think that's where Pitt has to find some answers, just simply in the moment executing. The opportunities are there. They got to hit them. Let's move along, though, because there's some personnel questions as well. Martin asks, why haven't Amsal Delalic and Brandin Cummings gotten more playing time? They looked good on Saturday. Stephen, you and I have talked about this off air. Amsal, presents a really bright potential with his size and with the abilities it looks like he will be able to have if he puts it together. But he hadn't put it together. I mean, still, this wasn't a complete game for him. I felt on Saturday it was his best game, but he still didn't shoot too sharp from the three, which is something he's supposed to be able to do. And in the other two games this season where he saw extended minutes, he had a significant amount of turnovers and not as many assists, and he was kind of a liability. I think that maybe now if he plays better, he'll get more of that time, but I think part of it is, especially with Amsal, is just he hadn't delivered yet.
Yeah, I agree, especially on Delalic. He did look good in that Miami game. And I would bring again, he looked really good offensively in that Miami game against, again, the worst defense in the ACC. So, I take that with a grain of salt as well. I will admit that his shooting percentages were better than I had thought they were when I looked them up on Saturday afternoon. I mean, he was shooting, I think, 60% on 2-pointers, upwards of 35% on threes, I think closer to 38%, but it was on really limited attempts. And what stuck out to me more from, games where he played major minutes, I think of, Ohio State and I believe Mississippi State, he started as well, where he not only kind of didn't look ready for the level of physicality that there is in the ACC and Power 5 college basketball or power conference college basketball, but also just didn't seem to fully understand what Pitt was doing every time defensively. So he definitely did take a step forward in that Miami game, and I think he will get minutes going forward, but I can't sit here and tell you that, he had done much over, the minutes that he had played in whatever the, 24 games prior that told me he was ready, while Pitt was in the middle of a long losing streak and a skid where they had lost 8 of 10 games, that he was the solution there, that this was some secret weapon that was waiting on the bench that, Jeff Capel was just kind of ignoring. I don't really think that was the case. Brandin Cummings, I think, is a little different. I think it's someone who, in certain matchups might not have thrived, but I think he did show that he was competitive defensively enough, that he was a good enough shooter, and that he had a little bit of an ability to handle the ball and create for others that might have earned him more minutes. But obviously that's tough when you have 3 veterans like Jaland Lowe and Ish Leggett and Damian Dunn all healthy. That's just, I don't know who out of that group you would have said, okay, yeah, Brandon, go take some minutes away from that guy. So I know people were frustrated about it watching, Amsal and Brandon play on Saturday, but I don't think there was really anything more than, with Brandon, there were guys ahead of him that were playing well. And for Delalic, he wasn't particularly playing that well. And, the amount of minutes that he saw on Saturday, I think, originally more out of necessity, and then ultimately he played well enough to earn those minutes down the stretch.
No, I agree. I think that it was something that he was able to kind of, force the issue himself. Both these guys did that in the case. And Jeff Capel did say about Brandon, he's earned more minutes. And even though Jaland Lowe will be back against Syracuse, we've been downplaying this Miami win. And again, they have the worst record, the worst defense in the ACC. Will ask, was there anything to gain from Pitt's win over Miami? And if you're talking about as far as resume building, absolutely not. No, but I think the thing to gain from this, Stephen, is that they didn't give up, because they went down again early in this game. And maybe that's something that's just another sign of just things that they have to figure out. But they fought back. They didn't go into a tank. They didn't look for excuses. They didn't say, oh, well, Jaland and Damian are out, so it doesn't matter. They were able to take control of the game in the second half and find their feet. I'm not saying that means that they figured it out and they're going to go beat, the rest of the teams on their schedule. But, things like that can wake a team up that has talent. I think that's the bottom line here. We know Pitt has talent. We know that they can be a good offense. It's up to them to actually execute it. And you get another not so good ACC team in Syracuse coming to your house on Tuesday night. So you have a chance here to find your feet, get right before you go on the road for a tough contest at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and you said at the beginning, stopping the bleeding. I think that matters. I do think that, momentum is real. Jeff Capel said after the North Carolina loss, a couple of weeks ago, that it was a team that was struggling with confidence. And to that extent, I think a win like this, at the very least can just kind of, temper some of the emotions in the locker room, can make guys feel a little bit better, can remind them of what they are capable of. And I do think that matters, especially in basketball. I think a sport where confidence really does matter. So, externally, I don't think it means a whole lot, but I think internally it does mean a lot to the guys in the locker room and to the coaching staff to go into a game where you're down 2 starters. I know Dunn's been in and out of the lineup, and he had been out for a game before, but you're missing not only your best player, but let's call it your 4th best player this year. I would say Damian Dunn has been, at worst. So to be down those 2 guys and then to beat a conference opponent, no matter how bad that conference opponent is significant to me. Just how significant, not very, but I still think that does matter. And it has the potential to set them up for a better finish.
No, I feel you on that. That's the thing, is that where no one's looking at this as an impressive thing. It's the bottom line is they need to get themselves right. I think Pitt has beaten themselves a lot in these 2 stretches of 4 games that four game losing streaks. And look, some of those are just, hey, they played a better team. Like SMU, I don't know who was stopping that 7'2" center that was just dominating them. Cooper Flagg, I don't know who's stopping that man outside of Clemson, but games where they've had it in their hands. Wake Forest on the road where they lost by 2, North Carolina on the road where they lost by they missed a buzzer beater opportunity there. Their loss to Virginia at home, a very winnable game that they just did not play well in. Their overtime loss to Clemson, their close loss to Louisville. There's so many of those games that if they flip just 2 of them, they're in a much different situation than they are right now, and they're still very much alive in the bubble talk, but now they have to battle to get back in it. And that leads us to our last question from Brandon. Is there enough left in Pitt's schedule to get the Panthers back in March Madness position? And back in is the operative phrase there, because Pitt's now out of it by all measures. When you look at where they were at one point, they weren't in the last 4 in. They weren't in the last 4 buys. There was at one point they were solidly in before these 2 stretches of 4 game losing streaks, and even through most of that before the Virginia loss, they were in those the last 4 buys. They were in the last 4 in the first 4. They were in those conversations. Now they're completely off that board for pretty much every bracketologist until they do something. And so they've got 6 games here, Steven. I'm going to run through them real quick and get your thoughts on if there's enough here. And then in the ACC tournament, obviously without an auto bid of, winning the tournament, they got Syracuse at home, Notre Dame on the road, Georgia Tech at home, Louisville on the road, NC State on the road, and Boston College at home. 6 contests before the ACC tournament. So you look at that. If they win all 6, they're back at the 21 win mark that they were at, before last season. But that is a tall stretch for a team that's played as badly as Pitt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is enough here to get them back in position, you could say. I mean,
yeah.
Let's assume they win out and they notch a win over a Louisville team that's now back in the top 25. I think that's really significant. And that would put them at, I believe, 21-10. Going into the ACC tournament, which that's a pretty good spot to be in. And I assume if they win out, I believe they would be 12-8 in the ACC, which was good enough for a 4 seed last year. It might not be good enough for a 4 seed this year, but it would set them up.
Good teams.
Yeah, it would set them up, I think, on a pretty good path. With some quality opponents in their way in the ACC tournament. You might have to win 1 or 2 games, depending on who it is, to get yourself into the field. But yeah, I still think there is, more than enough to at least get them into position, into the conversations, into the edge of the bubble, or, maybe back onto the bubble. I don't even think they really need to win out. They could drop that Louisville game and be competitive, but if you go 5-1 down the stretch, 20 wins, I mean, it's an outside chance, but it still, I think, puts you in the conversation and gives you a chance to maybe make a run in that ACC tournament. And if you can pull an upset or 2, then maybe you have a shot. But there is certainly enough left on that ACC schedule, with that Louisville game being really pivotal.
It really is. It is that's the one. And again, you got to set before they even get to Louisville, because that's still 4 games away. They got to set the plate. They got to set the stage for Louisville. They got to beat Syracuse at home. I really think they also got to beat Notre Dame on the road. That would be a quad 2 win at this point. And then beating Georgia Tech at home, I believe that'd be a quad 3 win. So you're looking at, I believe, at least a one quad 3 win, a quad 4 win, and or maybe another quad 3 win in Syracuse, but then a quad 2 win. You get those 3. then you could say, okay, if you beat Louisville, then I think they might get back into the next 4 out, or maybe even in the last 4 out if some bracketologists are more forgiving. Because again, they have better metrics than they did last year with non-conference strength of schedule and some of the teams they've beaten. But they got to set the stage for them. And if they lose one of those games before Louisville and then beat Louisville and then beat NC State and Boston College, I could still see that being part of the equation. But again, like you said, if they don't win out, I think they're in a position where they need at least 2 ACC tournament wins to get into that dance conversation. If they win out, maybe it is just one, but either way, this is the bed that they've made. Now they got to climb up out of it, and it's a steep hill to climb as they make that effort. We'll see what happens. All this road continues when they play Syracuse, 7 p.m. at home at Peterson Events Center. Read about all of that in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where both of us will be writing about it. Steven, any last thoughts on Pitt basketball or anything that we didn't cover here with the questions from our listeners and readers?
I don't think so. I mean, the job is simple on the way out here. Just got to win. I think, we talked a lot about style points earlier in the year. We talked about being competitive through some tough stretches, but right now the goal is simple. You just got to win to even get yourself back into the conversation. And I know the vibes feel very negative right now, I think, just kind of in general around this team, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as people, might feel like it is. And it has potential to get as bad, I think, as people feel it is right now, but just hold on. And I think this team has a chance to show you something a little bit different. We'll see them get healthy and see what they can do with these final 6 games of the regular season.
Absolutely. He's Stephen Thompson. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks again for tuning into the Pitt Mailbag Show. Stay tuned for all the other daily shows that come up here and the content that comes from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And look Tuesday night for our coverage of Pitt Syracuse, what happens with the Panthers and where they are moving forward. We'll have all that in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. See you then. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.